One of my favorite series was always the Tony Hawk franchise. The first 3 games are great, but it reached a question at entry number 4 that most franchises end up having to answer. What do we do next? Only the most successful franchises typically reach number 4, and many developers seem to see number 4 as a metaphorical crossroads of sorts, where the series can not only improve but also change if necessary. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 does exactly that, but rather than picking one area to improve upon, Neversoft improved in many different areas. Game environment. Keep the main idea the same, but change the way things around the game mechanics themselves work. Tony Hawk 4 changes this way to a certain extent. The first 3 games in the series were based upon completing goals within a 2-minute limit. Generally, there were 5 to 10 goals per level depending on the game, with the standard pillars of Collect Skate, Secret Tape, and High Score. THPS 4 keeps the general idea of those goals alive, except instead of having 2 minutes to complete as many as you can, each goal becomes its own entity. This works well because they added a few new goal types from the 3rd game. Collecting the combo letters has to be done in one combo, of course. Wouldn't work well if you couldn't restart right back at the beginning of the goal. Of course, this doesn't work quite as smoothly with the classic skate letters, as having 2 minutes to collect skate and do nothing else feels almost empty and far too easy in some levels. Also gone are the competition levels, replaced with one competition in every level. These are really hit and miss, some good, some really long and boring. All things considered though, not being limited with 2 minutes, which was too short for some goals and too long for some others, really helps free some aspects of the game to be somewhere they couldn't be before. Some fans mourn the loss of the 2-minute run, and I understand, but I just think this works better for the game as a whole. Size. Make it the same game, just bigger. THPS 4 does this, it adds to just about everything that you can. There's one more skater than in THPS 3, but I don't really count adding Bob Burnquist back in after he missed the 3rd game in favor of ESPN X Games Skateboarding by Konami, a great decision by him that still makes sense even today. Though there are technically fewer levels between 3 and 4, the difference in level size is astounding. They're so much larger than anything that THPS 3 had. But the Tony Hawk series wasn't built in a way that would undeniably benefit from larger levels. You score the most points through combos, stringing together tricks without letting all 4 wheels touch the ground. Sorta like in Cruisin' Exotica. Sorry about that. But big combos need places to go. They need ramps and rails. You have to have objects to trick on and off of. I found myself in a number of cases having to rely on flatland combos, because I wouldn't be able to find anywhere to go. You'll see some levels with big stretches of just nothing. I suppose that's because they ran out of space, but I don't remember that happening in THPS 3 quite so much. That's not to say that the levels aren't good, but when you're building a level, bigger is only better when you can fill it up properly. And some levels do this better than others. Shipyard is great, Alcatraz is great, and I do like San Francisco as well. You'll see a few more real-world locations like San Francisco, for example, and they still sort of work, but not quite as well as the others. Tony Hawk never really had a realistic playstyle that would benefit from that. And when it comes to being quite simply a bigger game, I have to mention how long it is. My average 100% playthrough of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 is around 40 minutes. My average 100% on the original at one point was around 12 minutes or so. My full playthrough of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 used for this footage was about 3.5 hours. And some of that is due to the fact that the number of goals per level increased from 10 to 16. Some of it is due to the fact that I had to skate around and physically find people in order to even do those goals. More of that is me getting distracted with the freedom and just messing around for a while, and some of the goals are pretty long as well, not to mention there are a few different things to do just to kill time. I found myself jumping between levels more than a few times in order to complete the game at its minimum requirement. All things considered, increasing size wasn't necessarily bad, but they could have done it a lot better. Stick with it. Though it's probably the most boring option, deciding to keep what works for sequel number 4 was the choice made by a number of good games. If it isn't broken, don't fix it, that sort of thing. What the developers of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 did well here was they realized that the first 3 games had worked because of the tight control, and they didn't change it much in the way of how it worked quite simply at its core. Simple, clean, and easy to learn. Okay, well, maybe fix it. There was a great progression in those first 3 in order to make combo scoring easier, therefore allowing for higher scores and bigger levels. They added the manual in THPS 2, letting the player travel freely while not landing, and then the revert in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, allowing for the combo to continue after hitting a quarter pipe. Unfortunately in THPS 4, there wasn't all that much further they could go with that. They added the spine transfer, which allows not only for transferring over spines like the name states, but also gave you the ability for a player to be righted in midair, rather than making you just fall on your stupid face. That was a much appreciated feature. Along with that, there are much more simple flatland tricks, different from THPS 3 because you don't have to start them with the special manual. Also, and I almost forgot about this because of how rarely it's ever used, skitching, grabbing and holding onto the back of a car, in layman's terms, makes its first appearance in Tony Hawk 4. Also, along with having the ability to double and triple flip some tricks in THPS 3, you gained the ability to do so with a few more tricks, and also modify grabs and grinds. But that delicious Tony Hawk core that we're all used to gets a few added improvements, some of which work, some of which fall short. Ultimately, I will say that the majority of them were very good, and you can see this because none of them were actually taken away in later installments. So, with all of this information that I've thrown at you, what do I actually think? Well, it's hard for me to really call this my favorite Tony Hawk game. The level design is probably the weakest in the series until Project 8. However, the spine transfer may have been the most important addition to the game, a great idea to keep the game flowing. I wouldn't say that the improvements completely made up for what the game lacked. It's still an excellent game, but it's definitely not my favorite in the series. I think Underground fixed some of the level design problems, while paradoxically being almost entirely made of real-world locations, and I'd pick either the third or the first game over this one.